Welcome to the Part 9 Energy and Zero Carbon Step Code Checklist Guide. Today we're going to be running through all the different aspects of the updates, the new features, as well as how to fill out the new checklists. My name is Mark Bernhardt. Thanks for coming. Now, many of you will have seen the checklist before, and you may not need to see every aspect of this, or maybe you're using it in a different form as a plan checker or as an EA. So not all of the sections of this webinar will be relevant to you. So we provided the timestamps for the different sections so you can skip ahead and only view the sections that are relevant to you. I'm going to start with a bit of an acknowledgement as well. It wasn't just us that put a lot of work into this. We had a whole team behind us and really appreciate all their help and their feedback. It was a great group of people to work with and look forward to seeing all of you out in the industry. On today's agenda, we're going to start with a review of the updates to step code, as well as the new zero carbon step code. We're going to do a checklist overview. We're going to talk about what's staying the same and what's new, and then do a step-by-step walkthrough of all the different features of the checklist. We'll also visit some examples of different types of buildings and different methods of filling out the checklist. This isn't intended to be step code education. So for those of you looking for specific step code education as to exactly how things work, that is a different class. Today, we'll just be focusing on how to fill out the forms in the checklist. I'm going to start with a few definitions. I'm going to use the term AHJ. That's authority having jurisdiction. This is a city or a town, basically whoever is responsible for doing the inspections in the local area. I'm going to say EA. That's an energy advisor, and I mean a certified energy advisor certified by NRCan. Some also call that registered energy advisor. We mean the same thing. It's someone who does energy modeling on Part 9 buildings and is actually certified or registered to do so. I'm also going to talk about the ERS, or the EnerGuide rating system. That is the system administered by NRCan that underpins a lot of energy efficiency programs here in Canada, and the method for modeling many of the Part 9 buildings we're talking about. Some of the key objectives of this update was to provide a compliance tool for revision 5 of the code. There's some new metrics and some various little tweaks and changes, so we needed a tool that did that. We also wanted to combine all the forms into one central document, so we weren't searching through different ones. The formats were basically the same, and it was sort of a collection in one place. Also wanted to use the full function of Excel. Excel is a very powerful tool, and it's important that we take advantage of that to save time, reduce errors wherever possible. And that's what we've set out to do here with this new tool. As far as who's qualified to fill out the forms, well, certified energy advisors would be qualified in Part 9 buildings. Engineers would certainly be qualified as well. The third group that's also qualified is what we call energy modelers. Now, these may be people without a formal designation, but still have taken training and are deemed qualified by the authority having jurisdiction that they can actually do a model on a Part 9 building. Typically, where we see this is like an architect that does the energy modeling as well. In some cases, people who maybe don't have a formal designation, like an architecture degree, maybe an engineering degree from other countries that aren't necessarily honored here. And so we do see those people, and they would be qualified to do it. But in those cases where it's not a common designation, we may be asked to produce evidence that we are in fact qualified to do this for the city or the town. Today, we are looking at the Part 9 version of the checklist only. Our friends at Focal Engineering did the Part 3 version of that. So if you're working on Part 3 buildings, I encourage you to go and watch that version of the webinar. But today, we are focusing solely on the Part 9 version of it. The BC Energy Step Code updates. The first update is that the removal of step 1 and 2. So step 1 and 2 are no longer available for any homes that are built after May 1st. For homes that are built before that, you can still use those. They would be grandfathered in. So if you're just completing a project now that was started before that, you may still use step 1 and 2 in areas where that was permitted. And To do that, you would need to use an earlier version of the checklist. The new checklist does not include step 1 and 2. Other than that, from Yui and Teddy, there are no other changes. The percent improvement is now been renamed. This is formerly known as the percent lower than the reference house. The percent improvement now harmonizes not just in name, but also with some relaxations with the NBC. So now there is a relaxation for homes that are less than 300 meters cubed. Roughly that translates to about 1,000 square foot-ish house, depending on how tall your ceilings are. And with that, that's not a super small house. We do see a fair number of those, but with that relaxation, what it means is that we will see some significant changes in compliance with those small homes. So small homes that may have been struggling before may find a much easier time of passing now with this relaxation. The percent heat loss reduction is a new metric for BC. Again, this was done to harmonize with the National Building Code. This replaces the previously BC metric that was percent better than envelope. So that metric is now no longer available. It's been retired, and only the percent heat loss reduction is being used as the alternative to Teddy. Now, this is a different calculation. It's a different way of measuring things, and that means we will have significant differences in compliance. In particular, this metric does not account for solar gain. So the previous percent better than envelope metric did account for solar gain, and therefore, if you had a whole bunch of south-facing windows, you could have had an easier compliance there. This particular metric does not include that solar gain, and you would not see that advantage for those south windows. On the air leakage front, ACH remains the same, so those have been using that and having success there. That is staying the same. There are no changes there. What has been added is normalized leakage rate and normalized leakage area. Now, this is again to harmonize with the National Building Code. Normalized leakage rate is how much air is coming through the hole. Normalized leakage area is how big is that hole. So this will provide a much easier compliance for smaller homes, simply because it is a ratio of surface area rather than a ratio of volume. And so again, we could see differences in compliance. So all three of these things add up to mean that we may have seen homes that were failing before and are now passing, and that isn't necessarily a mistake. That is on purpose. Some of these things needed to be tweaked to make things a little bit more fair. We may also see some homes in some cases go the other way. So it's important to understand that there are differences in the compliance now. The Zero Carbon Step Code is a new code to BC, and there is more information available on this code at the Energy Step Code website, should that be necessary. The basics of it are that there are 4 levels, EL1 to EL4, and within those 4 levels, we have 3 categories to choose from. We have a total GHG per year, we have a GHG per meter squared with a max cap, and we have a prescriptive option. Each of these may benefit certain different types of houses or types of construction. So we have 3 to choose from. We only need to pass one of the 3 metrics. As far as what is counted and what is not in the Zero Carbon Step Code, primary heating systems are counted. So that would be your main heat pump, your gas furnace. If you only have a gas furnace, any sort of combo heating system would be counted in the GHG target. Supplementary gas systems are counted, and supplementary electric systems as well are counted. And what we mean by supplementary is often described as a backup system, but it's not really a backup, because if the power goes out, this system would also be out. So what this is a system that is maybe hooked to the main system and is there to help out should the main system not be able to keep up. So we'll often see that as a heat pump with an electric supplementary system, or possibly a gas supplementary system that'll turn on when perhaps it gets too cold outside for the heat pump to work. Now, I will caveat this. It is included. Now, the GHG emissions from this system are included, but it is modeled use only. And so if the model shows no usage, there is no GHG assigned. And that can easily happen, particularly in my area here in Victoria, where it's relatively warm. If we put in any sort of half-decent heat pump, that heat pump's going to be able to accommodate 100% of the load for the whole year, and the supplementary system isn't going to be necessary. So no GHG will be assigned to that supplementary system, regardless of whether it is installed or not, and regardless of how the homeowner might choose to use it. As far as hot water goes, a tank or a boiler, that would be included, and any GHGs associated, that would be included. The redundant and backup systems are not included. So that wouldn't be a generator, gas fireplace, wood fireplace, any sort of patio heaters or things like that that are not in the energy model would not be included there. So those that are perhaps in the far north and are worried about resiliency and needing some sort of secondary type of heat should the power go out or something like that, your gas and your wood fireplace under this code is not restricted at all. You can still have those and be okay there. I will caveat this again. There is some ongoing work here that might curtail a little bit of that. I'm not privy to any of the detailed discussions, but it is my understanding that we would still be able to have the resiliency, but there may be some future updates here to perhaps curtail some of the luxury loads and extravagance that may not be a life safety issue. As far as equipment and appliances go, cooking and laundry are the only two items that are included, and they are included only in the prescriptive option. So the prescriptive option of this code is actually the most restrictive. The performance-based one really, is only including the heating, the hot water, and those sorts of things. But the prescriptive does include this equipment and appliances, and in that it is only laundry and cooking. So any other gas use in the house would not be included, not including fireplaces, not including your driveway heater, your garage heater, your hot tub heater. All of those things are not included. It is only cooking and laundry, and it is only in the prescriptive option that this is included. So those of us that are doing modeling, I mean, most homes that we encounter are going through and doing the modeling. They're not following the prescriptive path. There would be no reason for us to follow that prescriptive path. So, if you had a client that was really committed to, burning gas in their house and cooking with it, then that would still be permitted under this code. As far as the modeling for zero carbon step code goes, we will model as per the ERS or 93065 standards and following all the EnerGuide approaches to there. There are no changes required from what we've already been doing in step code for the zero carbon step code. Now, I'll caveat that a little bit. There have been some districts that are issuing different instructions, such as Saanich has issued a different instruction for energy modelers to change the order in which secondary heat systems are modeled, so that if you had a high carbon system, such as a gas furnace, you would have to model that as the primary system instead of a secondary, which would mean it would have a lot more GHG, and you have to assign extra GHG to a fireplace if there is one as well. So there are some areas that might be giving alternate instructions, and that is up to the AHJ to do that. So ideally those locations will be giving out good instructions, which Saanich has done. They've given out clear instructions. So energy modelers out there, watch out for that sort of thing. But generally, in the absence of any alternative instructions, follow the ERS procedures and model accordingly. We have given a new manual, so should anybody need a written down version of these instructions, the new manual is available there for this checklist. I definitely recommend folks give that a read, particularly if you're going to be working in the step code world, because we have included a few key items. Number one is clarifications on some of the modeling procedures. So there is some gray areas within EnerGuide, and what we've done is cleared those up. So, how you would approach a stacked and non-stacked situation, for example. So a little bit of clarity on that. There's also formulas there as well. And now, hopefully nobody's out there doing this math by hand. That seems like a lot of work and a bit of a waste of time. But it is helpful for folks working in this industry to understand the underlying math and how things are arrived at so that we can give good advice to our clients. So I certainly encourage everybody to go give that a read. The new manual also includes some special instructions for those that might use alternate code paths, such as PHPP. So what we've done there is give a guide for which cell in the PHPP applies to which cell in the checklist. And so that if you're using the PHPP as your modeling software, which is a valid code path, you can then fill out this checklist. Onto the checklist itself, the new Part 9 checklist. Starting with what stayed the same. All the code information that was available on the last form is still available. General look and feel of the checklist is very similar to what we would have seen before. We really didn't want to totally reinvent the wheel here. The old one worked reasonably well, and we didn't want to have to retrain the entire industry to look at something that was completely different. Key data inputs operate in much the same way and are in much the same location as they were previously. So if you're familiar with the old forms, our intention was to create a relatively easy switch to the new ones without you having to reinvent your whole work process. Some of the major changes include a title page. So we now have what we call compliance at a glance, so that anybody, regardless of their skill level, should be able to look at the form and understand what step is required and what step this particular project has met. We'll note that you'll notice on this form on the title page that step 1 and 2 for the energy step code are not available. And as I've said earlier, if you have a project that is still able to comply with those, they would need to use an older version of the step code reports. We've also started to take advantage of the full power of Excel in the macro-enabled file. So this requires a little bit of a security acknowledgement on when you download the file. You will have to activate the macros, and we show how to do that later in the session. But this allows us to extract data directly from HOT 2000, reduces our transcription errors, speeds up workflow, and generally helps us out that way. Should it be necessary, should someone not be using HOT 2000, you can fill out all the fields manually. We've also introduced the model detail report. So this is a report that is designed for a city plan review. Previously, many cities have been asking for the full house report, the HOT 2000 full house report, which is really full of a lot of extra information that we don't really need, has some errors in it, and just not really set up for a plan checker at a city to be able to easily do their job. So what we've done here is we've reorganized that and we've provided a better situation for a plan checker to verify the actual inputs of the model. So for cities that are asking for the full house report, you should start seeing this report instead from energy modelers and EAs around the province. A quick note that this will only work if you're using HOT 2000 and if you are doing the auto extract of the data. If you're doing manual entry or using a different energy model, it will not work, and you will have to produce either the full house report from HOT 2000 or your model's equivalent report. Another major change is that all the checklists are now part of the same Excel sheet. So previously we had a separate PDF for the mid-construction form, and the mid-construction form was quite different. So now we have them all the same. They're very similar in look, and it's an easy way for us to track the project through its journey through building. So we can have these 3 snapshots in time, and the intention is, well, we have the theoretical building at permit. Now we have mid-construction and things are starting to be confirmed. Some of them are for sure, some of them we still don't know yet. And then on to the as-built, which is everything confirmed. And we should be able to track it through 1, 2, 3 and sort of follow that process as we go. So they are intentionally looking very similar. The mid-construction form itself is probably the most different, as it is substantially different from the original mid-construction verification form. And there's a few key changes that we'll point out on this one. In particular, the mid-construction air leakage testing page. So we'll go into detail of how this works later in the session when we're doing our line by line, how to fill it out. But generally, there's a lot more room to describe to a builder what corrections might need to be made, a lot more data available for showing an AHJ that we have properly done this test and who did it. Many of us are working as teams, and so it doesn't necessarily mean I went out and did the blower door, even though my name may be on the model. As far as the submission requirements go for the BC Energy STEP code, most AHJs in the province have chosen to require the pre-construction and the as-built forms as part of their process. These are the most common forms to be used, and certainly throughout the province, we have seen really good adoption of that, and that standardization does help industry, smooth out the process because we're all doing the same thing. More optional are the mid-construction and the detail report. Not all municipalities have chosen to use these reports, although they are available, and it is up to the authority having jurisdiction as whether to require them or not. We often do talk about these as mandatory and required submissions, and generally that is the case depending on where you are. But it is important for folks working in industry and everywhere else. When we say optional, as in optional mid-construction forms, that is up to the authority having jurisdiction to decide what the option is. It's not up to the energy advisor, for example, to decide whether or not they wish to fill out these forms. It is up to the municipality, and ideally, municipalities have indicated through their websites and other communications what they are going to require throughout the process and when. The new checklist is available on the BC Energy Step Code website. That's energystepcode.ca. Both the manual and the checklist are there, so I encourage everybody to go and check that out and get those two documents. The exact location might change over time there, but I assure you that it is there. Look for the checklist that is the May 1st and beyond checklist. Currently, we're looking at revision 5, so there may come new revisions at some point in time. To get started with it, we need to activate the macros. Most computers will have a bit of a block on that for security reasons, so we need to activate those. And the easiest way to do that on a Windows machine is to just have the file in your folder there, right-click on it, go down to Properties, and we're going to unlock the file with this function right here. So I'm going to click Unlock, hit Apply, and OK, and that will allow the Excel sheet to use the macros. When you first download the file, depending on your settings, some of you may find that all the comments are exposed as the way they are in this file. Now, of course, that's not going to make the file very usable, so we need to turn those off. Not all of you will see this, but certainly some folks have. So the way to get rid of that is to search for the function show all comments, and there it is popping up there for me. And if I click that, then it will turn those off. You may have a button or something to do the same thing, but that's the way to do it. If you're operating on a Mac machine or some other version of Windows, you may find things are slightly different. Just use Google and there will be some instructions of how to do that, in addition to the instructions of how to activate the macros. I typically start on the calculator page. There's many different ways to do it, but this is where I start, so this is where I'm going to start the demonstration of how to fill it out. When you download it off of the Energy Step Code website, you'll notice it's all kind of folded up here and set up for a single family house. Now today I'm going to demonstrate how to do a duplex, so I'm going to need some more lines to do that. Now I've already enabled my macros, so I have the ability to use the buttons, and I'm going to say show more rows here. So that gives me the ability to see a whole bunch more rows. If I was doing a large townhouse, I could do the same thing and then fill out up to 20 models in this particular thing here. If for some reason I wasn't able to activate macros, there's a little plus minus button over here on the side, and you can use that if you are not able to use macros to expand the selection. But most of us will be using that hide show rows there, and should work quite well for you to expand the rows. Now, this should look very similar to how energy advisors are used to seeing it. All the previous forms look very similar, with the exception that we now have a few extra columns in here for the new metrics. So for example, building volume is now contained here, which allows us to calculate the NLA and NLR. air tightness metrics. We also have a cooling capacity that has been added in here, which calculates on our cooling, whether it's more than 50% cooling or not. And we have a big section on greenhouse gas. You'll notice that we have a set emissions factor for electricity and for natural gas. Propane allows us to enter a value, although I will note that BSSB has given us an emissions factor for propane as well as some other options. So this other and propane can be filled out based on that code memo. It specifies things such as wood, oil, and various other fuels there in that code memo. The district energy, this is a fairly uncommon thing in Part 9, but should that be necessary, the emissions factor would need to be gathered from the AHJ. There's also a section here for the fuel types in the prescriptive path of the zero carbon step code, and you'll notice this gives us the option to have it as carbon or zero carbon. So if there was any carbon-based fuels such as gas or propane, we would select carbon. Zero carbon would be anything that's electric. And so this can be filled out entirely manually, should that be necessary. Most of us probably don't want to spend the time on that, so we're going to fill this out using the auto-populate. This auto-populate function also allows us to have fewer errors because it is taking it directly from our energy model. And many of us are going to be, from time to time, missing a decimal place or something like that. That is going to cause an error. So if we can, let's use the auto-populate. So first thing I'm going to do is select Get Data, and then it's going to give me a screen here that I've already navigated to my energy model. So I'm going to put side 1 of my duplex in there now. And I can say Get Data on the second one. And it's as easy as that. It's now auto-populated for me. It's got the address in there. It's got my ERS numbers, which I've just set to generic, the heated floor area, and so on all the way across. Yeah, we'll notice it has also filled out the zero carbon step code things with some energy use here. The prescriptive is in there. This particular home does have some gas use, and it does have a supplementary gas system in it. So it is showing not much, but some gas use there. And it is then triggering the prescriptive pathway carbon on that. So now I've done my main data entry. I can scroll down here to set the required steps. So now this is my template. So I certainly encourage everybody to do the same thing that I have done, which is just save the file with some presets in it, which means I've saved the step 3 in it already, and my proposed is step 3 as well. Just saves me that 10 seconds. I don't have to go and do it. This particular one, I've saved the EL1 as measure only, and this particular project, I'm going to be ambitious and save it and send it to EL4. Once I've done that, this populates down here to the compliance tables here, and as well on the zero carbon step code. Now, I will note, we see this red number here. That's okay. It is failing this one particular metric, but we are passing the other two. That's perfectly acceptable. We only have to pass one of the 3, so we're still seeing a pass at the bottom there. Similar on the zero carbon step code here, we only have to pass one of the 3 things in here, so we are seeing a pass there, and that is correct. Some municipalities may be asking us to adjust the heating degree days, and I would certainly caution any municipality from doing that because we are changing the compliance, but we are not changing the energy model when we do this. Should your municipality be asking for a different heating degree day, you would be overwriting it here, and you do need to overwrite it after you import the file because it will get overwritten by the import. So here we've got a 4205 heating degree day, and that comes from the climate zone built into the energy model. If we scroll down a little bit, we'll see a little bit of informational items here. This does populate the report and can be overwritten in this location if necessary. Here it's showing the climate location, window to wall ratio, software used, and the version of that software. I will note that this file is compatible with HOT 11.11 and 11.12. We do also expect that it will be forwards compatible should a new version of HOT 2000 come out in the near future. So this completes our workflow on this particular page. we'll now go to fill out the pre-construction checklist. For this checklist, there's a few really important items that we have to make sure are accurate and consistent with our plans. A lot of those are on this very first page. So the builder, it's always nice to know who that is, and we should at this point know who that is. It may be an owner builder, but that's fine. So we're going to fill in that name here. If it was an owner builder, what we do is say the name of the license holder and then in brackets owner builder or something along those lines to make it clear that we do actually know who this person is. The project address is something that is really critical. We have in the past had some of our own projects get mixed up on lots because our lot tracking wasn't ideal, or maybe the builder switched plans or switched lots, which happens from time to time in the larger subdivisions. Sometimes they're pretty easy to get mixed up. What's really important here is that we communicate to the municipality which lot we're talking about. And this must match our plans. It must match the surveys and everything. We need to all be talking about the same lot, or that could affect our code compliance. Quite often in pre-construction, we will get a lot number, and that's all we're going to get. So writing like lot 4 Beach Drive, sure, that's perfectly acceptable. We're very clear about which lot we're using. There's not too much ambiguity there. Now, some point later in the project, we are actually going to get a street address. And I would recommend as a best practice that we don't go and erase lot 4. We just keep it there. And we say maybe do in brackets like this, and then we put in a street number. So it might be 254 Beach Drive. In brackets there, we have lot 4. And that's simply because, tracking it through from lot 4 to its actual street number, often, we can get things mixed up there. So best practice is to keep it both, just in case somebody hasn't updated their records for what the street address for this is yet. This municipality, this one happens to be in Terrace, so we're going to fill that out as Terrace. The postal code, quite often at pre-construction, we're not going to have that yet, so I would say this is an optional field at this point. Similar to the building permit number, quite often we're not going to have that. If you happen to have it, great, fill it in. Let's get that out of the way, but we may not have that. The PID or legal, quite often we don't get this either. However, if you don't have an address, the PID or legal description is a good alternative. One, I would say you either have to have the PID or legal or a specific address, one or the other. We must be able to tell the municipality which lot we are looking at and really have that locked down. The building type, this used to be part of the calculation in the previous forms. It is no longer part of the calculation. This is purely for information. I'm doing a duplex here, so I'm going to select that one. You'll notice my number of dwelling units is already populated from the data in the calculator. Now, right now, we're following the 936 EnerGuide rating system pathway. So I'm going to select that in my code option here. But I could select NECB, Passive House, or 936.5. Following it down here, we have that compliance at a glance sheet here. So we have what is required by our HJ, the proposed step. Same thing on the zero carbon side of things. For those that don't like written words, we have a nice picture here with an arrow pointing at which one you comply with. And that's hopefully easy to read for everyone. The second really big piece of information that must be correct on this first page is the plans. We must be able to communicate to the municipality what version of plan we are looking at, which plan set it is. If we're looking at different plan sets, we all know if you move one window, that could affect the permit compliance, and maybe it doesn't comply anymore. So we must all be looking at the same plans. Ideally, your plans come with an author, a plan version, and a date. We know in a perfect world that would be what happens. That doesn't always happen. It would be acceptable for you to find another way of communicating that. So if you have a plan that maybe only has an author, maybe it doesn't have a version, maybe it has a date or not, find another way to clearly tell your municipality what version of plans this is. That may mean taking the plans you have, writing a version on it, and sending that back to the builder and saying, submit this version because it shows which version that I looked at. But ideally, we're going to have a designer name on there. We're going to have maybe it's issued for permit plan version, and it's going to be on October the 7th or the 2nd here. How about that? Oops. Spelling does count, so it's important that that be correct. There we go. So once again, it is important that we are looking everybody at the same plans and the same version, and that must be clear. If a municipality receives one that does not match, for example, maybe it is version 2 issued for permit, and we are looking at version 1, and the energy report says version 1, I'm expecting that permit to be rejected based on that alone. They must match. We must be looking at the same plans. Moving on down, this is the whodunit section, who is filling this out. On this one, what we're looking for is a contact person here. So there's there's two pieces of information here. Whose insurance is covering this if something goes wrong, and who am I going to contact if I need to ask questions about this? So this section over here is really who we're going to contact if we have questions about this. This section over here is whose insurance is responsible for this if something goes wrong. There's a note here. If I hover over this, you'll see a note pops up that this is the designated contact person. So many of us are now working as teams, so this may not be a specific person. So we might fill in here, Bernhardt Contracting, and we also might have Bernhardt Contracting as the contact name here. I might have my name listed here if I'm going to be the designated contact for my team. But it would be perfectly acceptable to have a team name there as well as a company name there. What we're looking for is if some municipal staff member needs to answer a question on this, who do I call, right? And so that's why they need this phone number, and then they've got someone to call to ask questions. Same with the address and the email address. Maybe not necessarily the person that did the actual model, but who they're going to call with questions. Looking over at the right-hand side here, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on this because it is an important piece there. First, we've got a date. That's just the date I filled out the energy model here and did that work. The second piece down is the service organization. The service organization, for those that don't know how energy advisors work, provides a third-party quality control. So in the energy advisor world, we have energy advisor companies, maybe energy advisors as individuals working kind of on the low rung here. Above them, we have a service organization who's providing training and quality control for the energy advisors that work with them. And then above that, we have NRCan, which is providing an overall sort of licensing for the whole sort of industry there. And so they are in charge of making sure that they are checking my models to make, that and keeping tabs on whether I'm doing a good enough job or not. And if I'm not doing a good enough job, it's their responsibility to send me for more training. And if I'm committing fraud, then it's their responsibility to de-license me. And so if you're working at an AHJ and checking plans and you find an energy advisor that's maybe up to no good, this is the group that you would complain to. So in my case, my service organization is CHBA BC, that's the Canadian Home Builders of BC. There are others, we also work with City Green. There are various others around the province that do work and do training in BC. So it's not just one place. And that's why we have this written here, so that if there is any questions, there is an entity to go to and ask. The next one down is my Energy Advisor ID. So my Energy Advisor ID is 5182. It'll always be a 4-letter number combination like that. It may be just numbers. It may have more letters in it, but it's a 4-letter number letter combination like that at always. And so if I'm filling a form out and I'm selecting EnerGuide rating system for the way I'm filling this out, I must have an Energy Advisor ID because only energy advisors can fill this out in that way. And that Energy Advisor ID is what ties me to my insurance. And so you could quote that ID to the service organization and to NRCan if necessary, and they would be able to then maybe launch an investigation into me being up to no good or something like that if need be. And for that reason, it's the number that ties us to all of that sort of thing. So there is no place for a signature on this form. HJ shouldn't be asking an energy advisor to sign this. It's not, that signature isn't particularly worth anything. It is that ID that we're after. If I was working as an architect or an engineer, it's a little bit of a different process. In that case, we would be wanting everybody to follow the professional practice guidelines for whole building energy modeling. Typically in that case, we would see these forms as an appendix to the main energy report that goes along. In those cases, there still isn't a stamp or a signature on this particular form. It's just as an appendix, or following those best practice guides put out by AIBC and EGBC. Of course, just a reminder for the code echo to be placed in field 8. I've got that saved as xdof already, and certainly something reasonable to do in your template. Moving on down here, the file numbers are auto-populated here, so there's no need to write that in there. These, particularly in the pre-construction, may show up something like this, where we don't know what the file number is going to be yet at this stage, so it's just we just write it down as a number XX, and that populates fine. As the project goes through, our team does submit every file through EnerGuide, and certainly encourage everybody to do that, and then we would be filling in those numbers as we go. Some municipalities will require you to have that number up front, in which cases that's why it's in that location. Section D, the building characteristic summary. I like to call this the builder instruction page because that's the intent of this particular piece. The intent is to give instructions to the build team in a clear, concise way without a lot of clutter. It's not intended to be a verification piece for a municipality. It's not intended to be a minimum code RSI table. Minimum RSIs are no longer applicable, and so we don't need that anymore. If you're unsure about what to write in this section, you can hover over any of the cells with a red triangle in it. That will give you a sample instruction and a sample entry, and sort of what we expect to see in here. You'll notice they're all very much the same. First of all, they're very simple. All they really include is the stud size, the stud spacing, the R value of the bat, some critical items as to whether or not there is rain screen, whether or not there is exterior insulation, but we're not including drywall, we're not including finishes, we're not including exterior siding. Exterior siding, whether it's cement fiberboard, wood, or stucco, are almost identical. And so there's not really a material difference. We can assume that somebody is putting siding on that wall. If they were putting brick or rock or something that's quite a bit thicker, I would expect that to be listed. That is a material difference. Whether or not there is rain screen is a material difference. But we can assume that somebody's going to put drywall on the wall. That's a pretty safe assumption. If somebody isn't putting drywall on the wall, that's when I would specify there isn't drywall, just because that would be an unusual situation. So filling this out, I'm going to say, go look at my energy model, and I'll bring my energy model off to the side here so we have it. So in this particular house, this duplex example here, I have 3 ceilings. One of them happens to have spray foam in them, and the others look like they are trusses with R50 bats. So I'm going to start with that truss in R50. So I'm going to write truss. And this is actually, I should specify, because this is going to be the flat ceilings. And it's going to be a truss at 24-inch OC R50 bat. And then I've got a second ceiling in my energy model here that is a 2x10 at R20 at 24-inch on center with R28 spray foam. So this is going to be a vaulted ceiling. I think it is vaulted. Did I get that right? Yeah, it is a cathedral ceiling. And that's going to be a 2x10 at 24 R28 spray foam. There we go. So we've specified the spacing of the structural piece, the R values of the insulation. We've left off drywall. We don't need that. And now I'm going to go get the RSI value. And we're just going to use what's here in HOT 2000. Nothing fancy, just taking an average. Remember, there is no minimum RSI value anymore. Very few builders are actually going to be using this RSI value. They're going to be looking at the nominal value there. So this is really in many ways an informational piece here. So I'm going to, my spray foam, I'm going to put in 4.7 there, and just get my thing back here. And this other one, we're going to go 8.7. I'm just going to fill that in there. So in cases where we have multiple ceilings like that, you know, and here we have a wall, we have a garage wall and a main wall. I would typically just take the RSI value from the main wall because it's giving us a good representative sample. I'm not going to take the RSI value from the garage wall. That's not a very good representative sample. And yeah, again, it's not that I wouldn't necessarily go and average the two either. You could if you wanted to be, you know, absolutely perfectly specific, but that's not necessary. Just take a good average, sort of a good summary of what the R value is. That's really what we need. So moving down to above grade walls, again, I'm going back to my energy model here. We have a 2x6 at 24 R24 batt insulation. So I'm just going to write that down. 24-inch OC R24 batt. And that's going to have an R value of 3.88. So now many of you have actually asked if we could auto-populate this from the energy model. The answer is yes, we can. However, because everybody uses different names, different modeling styles, it got messy in a real hurry. So unfortunately, unless every energy advisor in the whole province is willing to name everything exactly the same, that's not a practical solution. But maybe someday we'll develop some AI that allows us to do that. So rim joists here, we're going to just keep working our way down and filling that out. So in this particular house, we do have a rim joist there. HOT 2000 calls it a floor header, just to be extra confusing. So we've just got an R24 batt in that rim joist there. Now, if I hover over here again, oh, it's not showing up properly. It's interesting. Oh, it's because I'm selected on it. So here, you know, rim joist R22 batt is the example. With some exterior insulation. You know, in this case, we don't have rain screen in this particular location, so I haven't said rain screen. And then I'm going to go get my R value, which is 4.7 on that. There we go. Floors over unheated space. Do I have any floors over unheated? I do. Yeah, there we go. So let's take a look at this. So we have in that code, I'm just going to see what we have in that code. So here we have an 11 7/8 joist, composite wood joist with R28 batt. There's the spacing there, 16 on center. And we're going to put that in there. So again, here's the simplicity here. So we haven't listed drywall. We haven't listed that there's sheeting because whether it's 3/4 inch sheeting or 5/8 sheeting on this floor doesn't really matter. So I'm not even going to bother listing that there's sheeting. So that was a I joist. I believe it was, yeah, it was 11 7/8 I joist. And 7/8 I joist. And that was at 16 on center, I believe. I've forgotten the R value already. Let's go back and look. 28. R28 batt. And that had an RSI value of 5.6. There we go. So now our floor is done. Walls below grade, this is going to be our foundation. So we'll go to the basement in this house and we will look at this here. So in this particular house, we have a 6-inch ICF with no wall finish. So that's going to give us a 3.7 RSI. And we've lumped our code here into this one piece. You could have it in both, and then you can specify both of those. You can say inside, outside insulation is this or that. Just the key here is that we're communicating clearly what is going on, and we don't have any extra detail that might clutter things up. So I'm going to write ICF, and I should specify that 6-inch ICF there. 6-inch ICF. So many ICF manufacturers will have an R value and a nominal R value, and this is where I would put that in. So I'm going to say this is R25 in this particular case for this this particular ICF. That's the nominal R value, and that's going to give us the RSI value of 3.7 on this particular thing. On the slabs, we use a similar sort of technique. We specify the thickness of the concrete and the thickness of the insulation. Here we've got what is an R12 nominal here at 2.1 RSI there. So there's a few different ways you could do this. Let's put in a 2.1 here. So we're going to have 4 inches concrete. And then in this particular case, it doesn't really matter whether it's EPS, XPS, whatever. What really matters is the R value here. So I will often write R12 and just leave it at that. The builder can decide what type of material that is. As we go into the as-built and mid-construction, then I might start specifying R12 3-inch EPS. Just to make it more specific. If we already know what the builder's planning to use, that would be fine to say R12 3-inch EPS. That would be fine. You can also just say you could also say, well, 3 inches EPS without the R12. I like to include the R value there just because it's a little bit more specific and allows that flexibility. Maybe there's a sale on some other type of insulation and the builder could swap that out if they wanted to, because it's the R value that's important, not necessarily the thickness. On the windows here, similar to other parts here, we want to know the material differences. We don't necessarily need to know every fine detail. So here we aren't going to be specifying the function. So we wouldn't separate out sliders and casement windows. We would separate it out if if one window was aluminum and one window was wood. We definitely want to separate that out. So one of the common things we're going to see here is that we might have our main windows, which are double glazed, argon filled vinyl frame. I don't know if everything's spelt there. We'll just edit that out in post-processing if it's not spelled correctly. I think this might be switched. There we go. Like I say, spelling does count. I should probably make this look a little prettier with my capital letters and things like that as well. Put your best foot forward when you're filling this out. And, contractor grade window is going to have a U value of 1.5 and solid again a 0.3. So I'm going to put those generic values in there and we'll refine them as we go through. I do have the option of setting an imperial U value. If your window order comes in with an imperial U value, you can change it. So now I've got my generic windows. That's maybe the windows for the whole house, but maybe I also have a patio door that is quite a bit different. And so I might say here, this is a steel and polystyrene slider, maybe, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe it's a vinyl slider, but it's something along those lines. And this maybe has a U value of 1.6. So in those cases, I would mark that change. In particular, we do see this often where you're going to have one window, like the big slider or something that's going to have kind of a pretty bad U value, and then everything else might be a little better. And so something that has a dramatic difference, maybe we say, well, yeah, we've accounted for that. That's what we're saying to the inspectors. We've accounted for this window over here that's kind of crummy. The rest are pretty good. And overall, we're looking at the average. If I had a stained glass window or something like that, I'd do the same thing. The doors here, pretty standard and straightforward. We're going to specify what type of door. So we might have solid wood. We're going to choose here whether it's an RSI or a USI. So I'll go maybe an RSI of, I don't know, 1.2 on that door. Not a particularly good door. On the air barrier side of things, here again, we're looking for some specifics, but not a whole essay. And ideally, enough specifics to clearly communicate that there is a plan for air tightness. So again, if you hover over the label here, you do get a bit of an instruction. And what I like to do is say, walls, we're going to have sealed poly and caulk or sealed weather barrier. Now, in the pre-construction phase, I may not know which the build team is going to choose. So saying or, I think, is perfectly acceptable. Both would be acceptable pathways. And so you may see some people using either or, and I think that's totally acceptable. Ceilings are going to be sealed, poly, and caulk. And in this case, again, you could have or something else. If you have another area of the building that is unique, maybe you put a third line in there with the plan for that. What we're really looking to show here is that there is a plan. If somebody just wrote poly, I would expect a municipality to reject that, and just because there is no plan there. That's just having poly is not an air barrier, so that there is no plan. Onto the heating system. Here we have 2 lines available, and there's a little bit more space than we've had previously. And here, the principal heating system, there's a definition here, should anybody be confused about what that is. If you're using a heat pump in the house, HOT 2000 will automatically assume that is the principal heating system, regardless of where it is placed within your energy model. So even though it is a type 2 heating system in HOT 2000, it does assume that is a primary. So if you have that in there, your heat pump is your primary. So in this case, in this energy model, I'm going to go look at my heating systems here. So I do have a furnace and I do have an air source heat pump here. So even though my air source heat pump is marked as type 2, that is going to be my primary system. And so I have a HSPF of 9 and a SEER of 16, and that's what I'm going to be entering in here. So I have HSPF as an option there. I have SEER, so we'll go 9, 16. You'll notice when I click on these, there's all options for AFUE. Should I be using a furnace, SSE, COP, depending on whatever efficiency metric you're using. So I'm going to say air source heat pump. Now, there is a temptation to use an acronym there, ASHP. Now, many people know what that would mean, but I would encourage people to not use acronyms unless we've given it to you on the side here, because that acronym may not mean the same thing to everybody. The supplementary heat in this case is a condensing in gas furnace, and it has an AFUE of 95%. So that's how we would enter that. In some cases, we have, say, a house with a legal secondary suite that might have electric baseboards in the suite, as well as an air source heat pump and a gas furnace. In those cases, I encourage you to be a little bit creative of how you communicate that. And just, again, we're trying to be clear about what's going on. So for me, if that was the case, I would write on this line that the suite has electric baseboards, 100% efficient. Maybe I'll just use an acronym there for it. Well, I just told you all not to do it, so I better not. I just need to know how to spell it. Oh, I can't spell it today. There we go. Whatever. We'll fix that in post-processing. So that's how I would do it. I would just write it on a second line like that with all the information. Domestic hot water, pretty straightforward here. I'm going to write electric tank, and we're going to select the ER factor, and it's going to be 0.89 in this particular case. Ventilation, I don't know if we have ventilation in this house. Better check here. So we've got, oh yeah, we do have an HRV. Look at that, at roughly 35 liters per second and a 78% efficiency. So we're going to write the efficiency at 78 liters per second is going to be 35, and we have an HRV. Now in this case, I'm using an acronym, but we've given you that one off to the side there, so I think that's acceptable. In the other category here, this is sort of a catch-all. Some AHJs may ask you to write something there. There's nothing specifically designated here for this. You could use this if you had a really complex heating system, maybe, and needed another line. That would certainly be acceptable. This is just to provide some extra space should there be something odd about the house. Maybe you want to brag about your solar panels, even though they're not counted as part of the code compliance. The next one down is the fuel use, the fossil fuel use. This is really set up for the possibility of a future rebate program, and for some municipalities that are tracking whether or not there is a fossil fuel connection here, because many of those connection pieces don't show up in the energy model, and so that's what we're tracking here. So we have three options. The building, including all its units, is designed with no fossil fuel, so there's no connection to fossil fuels at all. No propane tank that's hardwired to the building. A barbecue propane tank wouldn't count. That's not part of the building. Same thing with maybe a patio heater or something that's not connected to the building. We're looking for only things that are hardwired to the building. So that would be a propane tank wired into a propane furnace inside the house. That would count. Or of course, anything that's connected to a gas meter that's attached to the building. And then the second option is the building is designed for fossil fuel. So that's, of course, if we have a connection of some kind, or fossil fuel use is unknown at this time, which if you're in pre-construction, that's a perfectly acceptable answer. A lot of times we don't know. We don't know what the builder's going to choose. They haven't told us that there's a gas furnace in there, but maybe they're going to do something else, patio heaters or something, who knows. So we're going to say, I don't know. In this case, we know there is gas, so I'm going to select there is. And on the second line down here, we've asked that you indicate what is connected to gas. So in this case, it's the furnace, fireplace, and laundry that is connected to the gas. So what we're trying to capture here is things that would not necessarily be in the model. So the furnace is in the model, so is the fireplace. The laundry is as well. But if we had a heated driveway or maybe gas-fired pool heater or something like that, that wouldn't be captured here. So that's where we would want to list that here. And that fills out the bulk of the data entry for this particular report. Moving on down to the next section, we have the 936.5 section, which we'll cover in a different section of this webinar. But now we've completed the 936.6 version of this report. The last page is just the code compliance section, which may be reviewed by the municipality, but is really not intended necessarily for builder review, just has some details on it there. We're now ready to fill out the mid-construction checklist. So at this stage in the project, we've gone to site, we've done our mid-construction blower door test, we've taken into account anything that might have been updated, and we've taken that back to our model, and we have, for example, put in the air tightness that we expect to see at final, or maybe the one we actually tested here on site, as well as maybe updating any windows or anything else. So we've got what you might say a semi-as-built model, or we've put in as much as we can, captured any potential errors or changes and things like that. So we're now ready to start filling out the mid-construction checklist. And just a reminder on this one, this form is listed as optional. What that means is it is up to the AHJ to decide whether or not is required. It is not up to the energy advisor to decide that. That is with your city or your municipality. And please confirm with them what is actually required for the submissions. Many of them are listing it right online. And if you're running an AHJ, please do that, list it somewhere clearly on your website what the submission requirements are so that energy advisors have easy access to that. So now that we've updated our energy model, we are ready to go and populate things. So I'm going back to that form that we filled out previously, and you'll see we have the pre-construction data filled in there already. And I would note that the form works better and is a little bit better filled out if you already have that data in there. So if you're coming from maybe an older project that you're just doing mid-construction on now and you maybe haven't done the pre-construction checklist, what I would advise is just populate the data here in the pre-construction. You don't need to go and fill out the form itself, but populate the data here, and it will then populate all the various hidden tables and things like that that do interact with some of the as-built stuff. So so it is important to have all that data. So we're going to scroll down now to the as-built stuff. Now we are not doing the as-built checklist yet. We are doing the mid-construction checklist. But since the mid-construction is a sort of a semi-as-built, it does populate from the as-built tables. And so what I'll do here is I'll add more rows because I'm doing a duplex. So I'll give myself some more rows there. And I'm going to bring in now the data from my updated model. Both sides of the duplex. And there we go. So I think we saw this in the earlier report there too. Every now and then you will get a hang like this. We have software hang, we call it. And depending on your computer speed, the file you're bringing in, every now and then you will see that pause. Relatively normal. It's going to take a few seconds longer. Most of the time it's going to be instant, but every now and then we do see that. So don't panic if you do see that. So now our data has populated, and this form here is exactly the same as the pre-construction with all the carbon stuff on there as well. And so, again, we can manually populate this if we wanted to, but certainly the easiest way is just to bring it in there with the buttons. So now I'm going to scroll down a little bit more, and we are now ready to select our as-built step. So we are going to still be aiming for step 3 in this particular house for the energy step code, and I'm going to aim for the zero carbon on the carbon standard. And that has now populated the tables down here, the orange ones. So we are ready to go over to our form. On the mid-construction form itself, we've given a button here because, well, if I'm being honest, I'm a bit lazy and I don't like retyping things. So what this button will do, if I click it, will copy all of the text from the pre-construction form. And saves us a bunch of time, saves us a bunch of transcription errors. Of course, this is a great opportunity in mid-construction to go back and fix any errors that maybe were made in the previous form. But just saves us a bunch of time and auto-populates as much as we can here. So now you'll notice that everything on this first page is filled out and just is brought over now to this one. Section D also auto-populates itself. Now here's where we really need to start paying attention in mid-construction though, and capturing any updates. So for example, maybe this flat ceiling here, our truss ceilings in this particular house, perhaps they went say R60. And so I'm going to update that there in the text, and I'm going to update the RSI value. And now you'll notice when I do that, it flags it green. And that's just to give an indication to whoever's reading this form that something has changed. It's highlighting it green because it's changed for the better. If I was to go the other way and change it down, then it would highlight in red. Again, not necessarily going to fail the project at all. That red is fine. That happens fairly regularly. But it's just a flag that, something's gone down here. We might be a little closer to the line. Let's check that out and make sure we're all okay. So that can be done in any one of these fields, and it will highlight in that way. Moving down to the windows, now there's some of these metrics here that don't necessarily mean good or bad or higher or lower, as the case may be. So some of these will highlight in yellow. And so solar heat gain being one of those, having a higher or lower solar heat gain could benefit or hurt depending on what's going on with the project. And so it just highlights it in yellow, and that's just what the yellow highlight means. On the side of this section here is now where we start verifying what we saw at site or whether or not we did actually verify it. So now it's important to remember that an energy advisor is not an inspector. It's not our job to go and put stop work orders on projects or things like that. In fact, there isn't necessarily a requirement for us to go to site in mid-construction. That is just best practice. It certainly, I would argue, is a professional obligation if possible. But then there's going to be those sites that are, 4-hour drive, and you have to take a dog sled for half of that to get there, and it's just not going to be practical. So it is possible to fill this out without having been to site, as I mentioned earlier. And that is okay, but I think we need to do everything possible to verify as much as we can. So if you're not going to site, I would highly recommend that you're requesting pictures and of different things from your builder to get as much information as you can and as much collateral information and verification as you can. But this section here is really meant for when we go to site and we sort of verify it with our own 2 eyes. So if you click on these highlighted forms or cells here on the side, you'll get a selection. It says site verified, unable to verify, or not yet installed. So if this is a mid-construction where, I'm just there, just pre-drywall, maybe the attic insulation is in, I can say, yeah, I saw it there with my own 2 eyes. I site verified that, and we're good to go. Above grade walls, I can site verify that too. I saw that before the drywall went on. Rim joists, absolutely easy to see. Floors over unheated space, yeah, easy to see there. Well, same thing with walls below grade. So I can go and I can site verify all these. Well, actually, I should pause there at slabs because I wasn't there when the slab was poured. I didn't see it. And maybe the builder sent me pictures, but it's not necessarily clear that it's this site or something like that. And I wasn't there. I'm not quite comfortable saying that, yeah, I saw this with my own 2 eyes. So I'm going to say on the slab, I'm going to say unable to verify. Because I didn't see that slab being poured. The windows, yeah, we site verified that. This is just looking at the sticker. Does my sticker match? Maybe I'm gonna run an update and say, well, this patio door was actually 1.55 according to the sticker, and according to the sticker on the windows, they were 1.45 maybe. So I'm going to put that in there, and my model would then reflect that change as well. So we're just going by what the sticker on the window says. The doors, yeah, we can site verify that reasonably easily. The air barrier, of course, we're going to be testing it there, and so we should be able to site verify that. I mean, that's kind of the main reason we go out there. So hopefully we can do that. Here, though, so in my original form, I said sealed poly and caulk or weather barrier, because at the time pre-construction, we weren't sure. It's up to the builder to choose which one they want to do. So now we're in mid-construction and we can see that the builder did sealed weather barrier. So I'm just going to make that update there and change that language. Now it looks like in this particular version of the form, the copy paste isn't quite complete. And we'll get that on the next version when it comes out, hopefully sometime in the new year. There'll be some updates and we'll complete that. But so for now, the last couple of things here, we do need to fill in a few things. I could maybe, argue for the conspiracy theorists out there that we put that in there to make sure you'd check it. But in reality, that was just a copy paste that was missed on the auto button. So I'm going to have to write in here. We are still planning to use an air source heat pump for this particular house. And it is still planning to use a gas condensing furnace for the other source. So I'm just going to write that in there. Of course, these are not yet installed. I mean, we're just at drywall, so none of this is installed yet. So I'm going to say not yet installed. Domestic hot water tank, not yet installed either at this point. Same thing with the ventilation. So I'm going to say not yet installed for those. If we didn't have anything in the other, of course, because this does have a gas furnace, this is it has fossil fuel. And on these selections here now, you'll notice that it says unable to verify fossil fuel use. And that may be the case where, maybe some of the infrastructure isn't installed yet. You're still not sure. But hopefully by this point we're seeing whether or not that infrastructure is there. You're going to see the pipes in the walls or things like that. And again, we're going to identify which systems are using gas that we know of. So right now we know the furnace is using the gas, and we happen to see the laundry hookup is there, and the builder told us there was a fireplace, and we see the hookups for that there too. So I'm going to put that in. So now we've done that main part of data entry there, which matches the pre-construction, very similar, and that is intentional that they look very similar because we want it to be easy to read from one to the next and sort of follow the progress of the project as we go through. So moving on down to the next section here. This section is new, and we call it the D2 mid-construction testing results. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit to get a little bit bigger on the text here. This is a new form here, and it expands out what was on the original mid-construction verification form. The idea is to give more detail and perhaps more instruction back to the builder, something that they could find useful in if they need to do any corrections or things like that. So as I said earlier, it is possible to fill out this form without having done a blower door test. There are a number of circumstances why that might be the case. Maybe the project's scheduling just wasn't feasible. Maybe it was a really far away project or something, and really remote or something like that, and energy advisor can't get there. Who knows? Pick your reason. There's all sorts of reasons that doing the actual test is optional. The city can require this form, but the code does not allow a requirement for the test itself. So this form here, when you start at the top, there is an option for no mid-construction site visit was completed or mid-construction site test was completed on. So if I select no there, it blanks out the testing requirement there. I can still fill this out. I can still fill out the rest of it here, and I can still say, well, maybe I went to site, but I didn't do a test. So I could say, well, there was a gaping hole in the attic, please fix that, or, things like that. I can still give builder feedback, having not done a test and been to site. And I can also say, well, site visit wasn't practical because I was going to have to take 3 boats across the lake and the lake was frozen. And so, that is a valid response there. So since we did go to site in this case, we are going to select mid-construction verification or site visit completed on, and I'm going to, I'm going to write the date there, whatever it happens to be, and put that in there. Now, on the testing conditions here, we have a high and a low pressure. Now, it's not expected that you go to 50 pascals. There's an instruction if you hover over that. Now, if we're in a situation where we've got no drywall, we've just got poly up, I don't want to run my blower all the way up to 50 because I'm going to rip poly off the walls. I mean, not that I'd ever done that. Maybe this guy I know has done that 1 or 2 times, but we definitely carry staplers with us in our vehicles. And so, going up to 30 pascals, totally reasonable, whatever the energy advisor is comfortable with, where they won't cause damage. What we do need, though, is more than 1 point, because the test is based on a slope line. That extrapolation up to 50 pascals requires a slope line, which means we need more than 1 point. Ideally, you're collecting at least 4 to 5, at least. If you can get more, that's great. But in order to get a good, accurate test, we definitely need more than 1. So if an energy advisor is going and just using the manometer, setting it to 50 and using that result, that is not a valid result. That's not creating a slope line. So we must have that. And so that's why we put high and low test results here. Not to say that they're any number in particular. It could be kind of almost any number. It's just to show that that slope line was created. So typically on our team, we would start at, say, 15, and we would go to 30. So I'm going to say my high and low is that. My test direction, maybe I have unsupported poly, so I'm going to say I pressurized. I pushed on it instead of pulled on it, which would be valid. Either direction is fine. The result isn't necessarily as important here. This is where we're catching problems before they become covered, right? So, that the actual result is maybe secondary. So I'm going to say my best result was 2, and that was based on ACH. Now you'll see we have NLR and NLA as an option there. This particular one, I'm going to say it's ACH. I also have the option to fill out testing completed by. Now, many of us are now, coming together and working as teams. So I may have done the energy model, and one of my team members may have done the blower door test. And so the request from the municipalities was, well, tell us who did this test if it was somebody different than doing the model. So we have this separate, name and company name, phone number, and such. So, for example, might have been other team member on my team, and they're still at my company, and so I'd fill all that out. There is a spot here to fill out their energy advisor ID too. So we'd have a different energy advisor ID than is on the front page. And what that's saying is, well, I did the model. I'm responsible for the model. This is who did the blower door test. They're qualified. Here's their energy advisor ID. But it wasn't necessarily me, and that's perfectly acceptable. That's within the NRCan rules. It's within the rules of the code to have somebody different doing the blower door test, provided they're qualified to do so. And it is, again, there's a useful note here. It is up to the AHJ to decide whether or not this person is qualified. It is generally accepted that an energy advisor, certified energy advisor, is qualified to do this. People with different certifications, presumably an engineer would also be deemed qualified, but people with other certifications may have to justify their qualifications. So the next line down is the state of home during test. What we want here is a description of what was going on with the home at the time. So say, for example, you got a pretty big fail on your results. Well, that may still be okay if you're missing a few windows, maybe the garage wasn't fully complete or there was big gaps or something like that, right? So this is sort of providing that context, right? If those big gaps are well known, well, we tested anyways just to see if there was any other big gaps that we didn't see, and that we're pretty sure this is going to be okay in the end. So what we might say here is this is a pre-drywall test and missing front and side door. And then we'd say maybe these were covered with poly at the time of the test. So this isn't going to be like a super accurate test in this case, but we're trying to find out those problems. We're not necessarily trying to get a really accurate result. We're just trying to prevent problems in the future. So the next line down here, the status of the building code compliance. This is a bit of a judgment call on the part of the energy advisor. And energy advisors, I would hope, are experienced enough and skilled enough and feel confident in their skills to be able to provide this judgment call. At the end of the day, though, it is up to the builder and the AHJ as to how they would like to proceed. So we can make the judgment call. It can be ignored by the AHJ. It can be ignored by the builder. This is just us making a recommendation one way or the other. So if you click on this cell here, you will be given 3 options. The first one is building expected to pass, no change required. So in this case, I got a 2 ACH. We're only aiming for step 3, which is 2.5. So we've got a lot of wiggle room. I would say building expected to pass. We're in the clear. Don't let your guard down, builder, but no changes are required, no corrections. Giving them the green light. The next one is building expected to pass with minor corrections, no further testing required. So if I got like a 2.6 or something like that, there was a few holes around the mechanical or something like that. Sure, I would say this, I don't need to come back and test. I don't think that's required. You know what you have to fix. It's close enough. We think we're going to be okay. And down here, I would say, repair holes around mechanical. And I might also say improve caulking on living room window or something like that. I'm going to give my list of recommendations for the builder. That's why we've provided such a big area, so you can kind of write your essay of what the builder should do and what they should be doing. And it sort of covers the energy advisor a little bit as well too. I mean, quite often we go to sites where the site super maybe isn't present at the time of the test, and so it's our way of communicating back to that construction team and saying, well, I was there. This is what I saw. This is what I want you to correct before going to the next stage, before covering it with drywall. And then, if they fail in the end, you can say, well, did you repair the holes around the mechanical? And if the answer is no, well, like, I tried to help you, but there's only so much you can do, right? I'm not a magic worker, and we're not there to hold your hand. The last option here is building did not pass, corrections required, retesting recommended. So notice it says retesting recommended, doesn't say retesting required. And this is kind of your red light. So this is where a builder, maybe did kind of badly, and we're not sure that the corrections are going to be enough, and we really should be coming back to retest. So at this point, if we're submitting something like this, our general recommendation is that the builder fix it and then have us back to test before we send to the city. So I think it would be unusual for a tag like this to be sent to the city. The cases where a city might see this tag are if the plan to correct the issues involves using the drywall. So maybe we've done a pre-test, you know, a pre-drywall, and then we said, well, you know what, let's go to drywall. We're going to go airtight drywall on this, maybe using aero barrier or something like that. And then we could proceed because our plan to fix it includes, you know, proceeding down the road a little further. But we're still saying, well, we should recommend testing after, you know, after that. You know, that airtight drywall task is completed, just to make sure we've actually got it. So it's not necessarily a showstopper. That would be, of course, up to the AHJ. If the AHJ feels that, well, there's no hope this builder's getting there, they've got to stop and fix before they proceed. That would be up to the AHJ. But generally, what this means is we need to come up with a plan. We got a bit more of a serious problem here. We think you should retest. And quite often when we're in this state, what we'll do here is we'll write see attached report. And that attached report should come to the city with this form if it's going to the city. But that's, you know, in our case, that's going to include a whole bunch of photos with an arrow pointing to where the leak is and a much more detailed list of corrections for the trades or whoever happens to be there to go through and correct. So we're giving that list back to the builder to make sure that they have the information they need to go and succeed at this particular project. So I'm going to leave it on green light for now because our particular builder in this case has done well. Moving down the rest of the form, again, there's that 936.5 section, which we'll come to in a later section. We are just leaving it blank because we're running through the 936.6 section here. And the code compliance section is the same as all the others. No changes there from the previous forms, so it should read exactly the same. And we do see some fails showing up here, and that's just on the prescriptive carbon code because it is a little bit more stringent than the others. But we only have to pass one of these three sections, so we are still passing. So nothing to worry about there. So now we're ready to fill out the as-built checklist. This is one of the required forms, so every step code project must have this form filled out. And I am once again going back to my my original form here that I've kept going throughout the project. You know, now it's going to be a number of months later, and the project is actually fully complete now. I've been to site, I've done my blower door testing, taken my pictures, and I'm now back at the office ready to do the code compliance form. So we have data in here from the mid-construction results. And so what we need to do first is just remove that data. And I'm just going to click the delete button. And I'm going to pull that data out because it's no longer valid. I've now got an updated blower door test in there, maybe, you know, another couple of windows changed or something like that. And so I'm going to go and get my latest and greatest energy model, and I'm going to populate it in there. So here we go. And it's going to fill back in and put all its data in there, same as it did in the mid-construction. There it is. And it's filled out everything again. All the heating degree days are there. Everything's kind of set and ready to go. So we are ready to move on to filling out the checklist itself. So I'll tab over to that. Let's zoom in so we can see everything nicely. Now, once again here, I don't like filling out forms, so we've put a button to copy everything over from the mid-construction. So important note that this does copy from the mid-construction. So if you haven't filled out the mid-construction because your city didn't need it, what you're going to need to do is go to the mid-construction form, hit the copy button there, and then come here and copy this through. So the final as-built form is very, very similar to all the other forms. A few minor changes. Obviously, the title is different, but this first page is very similar with the exception of this section right here. Instead of a plan date, we now have a site visit date and info provided by. So this is where we'd have, if we have an as-built set of plans, this is where we would list that. So maybe it's as-built plan dated or version 3 maybe. You'll notice it also says information provided by the builder, which is perfectly acceptable, right? We often see plans where, well, like a window or two is crossed out. That can be perfectly acceptable too. Any number of different things could be put in here. What we're trying to do with this field is say, look, yeah, we have looked at the updated plans. We have looked at as-built. So what you actually write there could be a little bit flexible. What we're trying to communicate to whoever is reading this form is that we did actually look at the as-built, and this is actually the updated version that we're looking at. We're not looking at something from 8 months ago that's changed a whole bunch. And of course, we have a site visit date here too. So if we went to site today, we'll have today's date in there. And that should match your blower door data and your ERS submission and such as well. So our data for who's responsible for this model is already filled out there for us. You'll notice now the end file numbers are showing up there for any of the jurisdictions that require the end file. Now I haven't registered this particular file, so I've just got little X's marked in the number there. But at this point, you should have a proper end file number. Maybe it hasn't made it all the way through the ERS process yet, but you should still have that number there available and would be more properly filled out than what I'm showing here. So everything from this section has been copied over, and you'll notice our highlights from the pre-construction form are still highlighted there. So in the event that you're not using the mid-construction form, this is the update. It will highlight based on what's in the pre-construction form, and so anybody who's skipping that middle step would still have those same highlight functions that we saw on the mid-construction form. This form is the same as the pre-construction. It's intended to match so we can track the project through. Functions in the same way, so I would need to capture any updates here. Maybe perhaps this was actually an R28 bat that went in there, and then I would update that here as well, and then we'd see that same highlights. So it's up to the energy advisor to run through and update all of that. Our heating systems are here and such. Now, you notice we are not listing model numbers here. That's not necessary. Of course, that would be necessary in your data collection for the ERS standard, but it's not necessary to actually list model numbers here. But what we are doing is sort of tightening it up and making sure that this is now the exact thing of the heat pump. So that heat pump might be installed now, and it's actually 9.2 HSPF, and so I would be putting that in there. So it's no longer my generic assumption. Maybe the AFUE of the furnace also changed, and hopefully because that number I had before there was pretty low. So hopefully they're putting in a better furnace than that sort of generic assumption. And so you'll see that it highlights there as well. In this particular case, it doesn't know whether that's good or bad, so it's just highlighted it to show that there is in fact a difference. We'll go back to the fossil fuel declaration here too. So we know, of course, this house does have fossil fuel. We still do have the option to say unable to verify. I expect that would be a very seldom used option here. Certainly, I'd want to know why somebody wasn't able to verify that. That should be something we can do. And once again, we're going to list which appliances have the fossil fuel use here. So we're going to list that in there. So now we've made it through the data entry, the bulk of the data entry for this form. If we scroll down again here, we end up at the compliance information, and so we should be fine there. This is mainly city information. Everything should be filled out. If you're filling these forms out, I would recommend that you take a quick gander at this just to make sure that it is filling out. Some of the earlier templates that went out in the beta version did have a few bugs here where you would sometimes get null values in this, and so if you're using an older template, you may see that. If you are using those templates, please do upgrade to the new ones as they avoid those issues. And that concludes the as-built checklist. One final step in submission to your AHJ is going to be, in many cases, to produce the HOT 2000 detail report. Now, in the past, we've been asked for the HOT 2000 full house report, which, as many energy advisors know, is full of all sorts of extra information that we don't need. It's hard to read. Some of that information is not correct. So what we've done here with this permit form is essentially build our own BC version of a full house report, and it's designed for a plan checker to more easily verify the actual inputs of the energy model. So if you're being asked for a detail report or a full house report from an AHJ, this is now the form they are intending you to produce. So to produce these forms, we're back on the calculator page here, and there's this blue box here, and we have a button for pre-construction detail report and as-built detail report. So an important note is that these will only work if you have auto-extracted the data. If you've gone through and manually filled out the data, or you are using a model that is not HOT 2000, these reports will not work. And so you will need to either submit the full house report from HOT 2000 or a similar sort of version from report from whatever model that you're using. So most models will produce some sort of report that says what the model inputs are. And so if you don't have the auto-populated data in here, these will not work, and you will have to submit one of those alternative reports. So to produce these, all we do, the pre-construction, click the button, and we'll see this pink tab show up. I'm going to make both of them so we have the as-built showing up as well. And if I click on those, I can see this report here. And this can easily be sent to a PDF, send it to a PDF and then send it in with your permit form as just a sort of standard practice there. Some AHJs are asking for digital versions of this, and I think that's great. Going paperless, that's excellent, and that is certainly an option with this as well. So what we've got in this report is we've got the address, and we're just at any place here. The top box is the total fuel use for the project. So in this case, we've got a duplex. So what it's doing is taking both suites and adding them together. So that's the total electricity use for the whole project, total gas use for the whole project. We don't have any propane or other in this case, so they're showing up as 0. So if we had a big townhouse complex, it would be taking all of those townhouses and adding them together into this box. And it's saying model 1 here because that is the first model in the line. So that is taking model number 1. So it's taking this data. And model number 2, if we scroll down, is there at model number 2. So if you have, again, 6 or 7 models in there, it would model 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all lined up according to which line in the calculator they follow. And this report is designed for a plan checker to sort of smooth out their process, give them the information they need to verify that the model is accurately done, while sort of cutting away all the extra information that we would have normally seen in the full house report. So what we have here is overall walls. So this is listing all the walls in the building. And so in this particular model, if I bring that model back up, not the internet, I don't need that. We bring the model back up. We can see here I have just 2 walls in this particular model. So I have a garage wall and I have a main wall. So there is 2 walls showing up in the sheet here. So the garage wall, 2x6, 24 on center. Garage wall is the name of the code that we've given. That's just our custom code showing up there. And the main wall is just showing that name of the custom code there as well. You'll notice that where we've used the code selector, we've just got numbers showing up there, which admittedly isn't very helpful to have that number, but we'll show a section later on in this report that will sort of demystify those things. So it can be helpful for energy advisors if you're using custom codes to actually name them what they are. If it's wall 1 type 5247 or rather whatever it is, that's not necessarily a useful description. And certainly for a quality controller or somebody doing plan checking, do them a favor and name it something that is clear and useful. Something along these lines would be kind of clear and useful. And so what we have here is the overall effective RSI of that wall. Now, keep in mind there is no minimum RSI values to be had in this particular code. So this is not here intended to say, well, you must be at least this. That's not the intention. The intention is to be able to look at this and say, yeah, that's a reasonable RSI value for something that has 24-inch on center, R24 bat. That's reasonable. If this said like 7 or 8 or something, I would know there's something fishy with that code, and I could, you know, if I'm the plan checker, I could reject that permit and say, Energy Advisor, you got to double check that code. That seems silly. What we can also do is verify the area. So for a plan checker, that's very easy. I can say, oh yeah, garage wall, it's this long by that tall, and I can say, yeah, 24 meters squared. That sounds right. That looks like a valid, you know, input into the model to me. And that's the intention of this report, is to say, yeah, you know, quick check here and there, speed things up a bit. We've got valid inputs going all the way down here. Foundation walls are there. You notice it lists interior and exterior things there. So the exterior insulation in this case is 0, interior is RSI 3.7. And so we have a sort of a split foundation RSI value there. Onto the windows here, we've got windows and doors listed. So the name that I put into my energy model. And again, here it's courteous to your quality control person or to your plan checker to name the windows something that makes sense. So in this case, you know, we have a bedroom north. You know, hopefully that's clear on the plans as to which bedroom that is. But you know, some sort of clear indication of which window this is. So it might be the, you know, the living room window by the fireplace or something like that. You know, some sort of clear indication it helps everybody out. We have our code, our custom code name here, and again, this is just coming out of the name that we've given our custom code. So clear naming becomes valuable, and we're just using custom code labels here. You could use the code selector, and it would show up as a number there. That's acceptable. We'll come to that in a second. It has the U value, it has a solar heat gain, and it has the area. And again, here's where a plan checker can go and verify, is the window the right size? You know, we looked at the sticker on site, so is the U value correct or not? The mechanical systems are listed here. So there's our condensing gas furnace. You know, the fuel type is there, the performance rating, and so on, all the way down to you know, what our cooking is done with, and laundry is there, as well as the supplementary heat is there as well. So a little bit of mechanical information. Now here's where we get into some of the model details. So when we're using custom codes or when we're using the code selector, this section is helpful for that. Because it's auto-generated and everybody's modeling slightly differently, every now and then this can turn into a bit of a messy pile. But for the most part, you will see it broken out similar to this, where we have the floors. It gives us that code for the floors. That's that numerical code that basically doesn't mean anything to us. So what we want is a more breakdown of that. And so it's given us that breakdown. It's saying the structure is wood frame, the component size is 2 by 10, spacing 16, insulation layer 1, R28, you know, no insulation layer number 2, interior is wood, sheeting is particle board, and so on. And so we get that breakdown of those codes. So any code selector codes or custom window codes will be broken down in this area as well. So if you have any numeric codes within the wall systems, they will be broken down here as well. So here's the windows, for example, on the custom code of the window. So we have solar heat gain, you know, what it actually is, whether it's a you know, picture or not. So a good way to double check your custom codes actually, and sort of verify that. And then moving on down to model number 2. Model number 2 in this case is going to show up almost identical and have its thing here. So you know, this is one of the reasons why we say really digital submission is the way to go on this, because this could end up being a very lengthy report with a more complicated house. This isn't a particularly complicated house with very few walls and things like that. So so it's not a very long report, but it could get very long. And so digital submission is really the way to go there. So if we're working at the city and we're now receiving this new form into our permit compliance process, We're going to need to run through and check that for errors, whether it's compliant or not, and what's going on with the various components of it. Now, we've already seen how to fill it out, and so I'm assuming that everybody watching this section has already watched that section. So what we're going to be talking about here is how do we enforce code? What is justifiable rejections? What things do we have to see versus kind of what is optional on this section? So starting at the first page of the pre-construction checklist, as far as what is mandatory goes, definitely we need to be seeing some of the information here in project address. For example, we definitely need to know which lot this is, right? That is an absolutely required thing. This house on this lot may be different than the code compliance of that house on that lot, or even the same house on a different lot. So we can't just necessarily be changing the address, even if they are the same house. We do actually need to have a separate energy model for those houses. It can be copy paste, that's fine, but as far as energy model goes, but even slight changes in direction of the same cookie cutter house might produce different code compliance depending on where it is. So knowing the lot is important and required, I would say. If it is unclear to a plan checker doing a review which lot this particular report belongs to, it should be rejected. The municipality, obviously, you should have that. Hopefully people know which town they're building in. The postal code, I would say, is optional. Many of the times when we're starting out a new development, we wouldn't have a postal code, and we won't have that for some time into construction. So I would say that is optional. If it's available, let's put it in there, but that is definitely optional. The PID or legal description, I would say, is also optional if the address is known. So I would say one or the other is required. So address or PID or legal description, that would give us that exact lot. And that saying like we are talking about this lot with no ambiguity there. So one of those would be required. If neither of those are there, automatic rejection, send it back. That certainly wouldn't comply. Of course, we're also going to need to know who's building this. At the time it comes into the permit desk, we need to have a licensed builder or a certified owner builder on there. So if it's an owner builder, it's going to say their name and their owner, maybe in brackets, owner builder on there. So we're going to know who's building this. This isn't, this shouldn't be left blank. From time to time in our early reports, when we're doing drafts and stuff, we will leave that blank. Maybe the builder hasn't been selected yet, but by the time it goes into the permit office, that should be written down there. And I would say that's a reject if something isn't filled in there. Now I've filled this form out for the ERS pathway, which is going to be the most common that districts are going to see. We'll touch on the other pathways in other sections of this video, but for now, I'm just going to follow this. I expect this is going to be 95 or higher percentage of what districts are going to see. So the second piece here that's going to give us a lot of careful checking is what are we basing this on? So these three fields here are telling us who did the plans, what's the date or version of those plans, and really locking down, we are all looking at the same thing. It is very important that we are all looking at the same plan. We know that as soon as we change one window, the whole permit compliance could be different. And so we must all be looking at the same plan. So if you're receiving a step code permit form and a set of plans, and the date on those plans does not match the date on this form, I would say that's an automatic reject. If you get a plan that doesn't have a date, maybe doesn't have an author, what I'd be looking for in that case is some sort of indication to confirm that the energy advisor who did this energy model is looking at the same set of plans that you are. So you might see that come back to your office with a stamp on the plan saying energy advisor reviewed this file on such and such a date. We will tend to do that if we get, say, a set of hand-drawn plans or a set of plans that don't include a date. We'll stick a stamp on it and say, this is our saying we saw it on this date. This is the version we're using, and send that back to the builder. That's the set of plans that should come in with the permit to say, yeah, we're all looking at the same set of plans. If it's unclear, definitely I would raise a question about that. If it's definitely the wrong version of plan, say we modeled off issued for development permit, and there's a set of permit plans coming into your office, I would say definitely that is a reject, and send it back to make sure that it is on the same version. A lot of times the energy advisor is just going to take a quick look at it and say, yeah, these are the same, everything matches, all good to go. I'm going to change the date in this section, change the version, and send it in. So it's not like it's a lot of work going back to the energy advisor. Typically, it's one of the last stops on the kind of the train to get into permit. So the final version of the plans is going to go to all the trades. It's going to go to the energy advisor just for the quick look, and everybody's taking that final documentation into the city. So very important that that be the same. As far as section C goes, we've discussed earlier that the full name could be a team name, and that would be acceptable. This contact info here is really for you, the plan checker or the building inspector, to have somebody to call if you need more info or if you need clarification. We've had a number of building inspectors, and I really do appreciate getting this call where they're on site and they're looking at the slab, and they're we didn't specify whether it had a thermal break or not at the edge of the slab. Certainly it would be best practice to specify that, but for whatever reason it wasn't done, and they're questioning whether or not this project needs that thermal break. So I really appreciate that call. So if you're out there in the field doing that, that certainly is appreciated, and that is why we put the contact info there. So if there's any questions like that, you can confirm. Certainly also appreciate the heads up if you're on site doing an inspection and my report says it's supposed to be R24 on the walls and you're only seeing R20. That'd be great to have that heads up so I can call that builder and say, hey, have you made a change or something? Is there anything we need to know about here? Maybe we can update that model, and that's okay. Maybe we've already had that conversation with the builder and the forms just hasn't been updated yet, and it's actually okay, and I can give you that assurance. Maybe there's a mistake there that we can correct early in the project. So certainly don't be afraid to use that contact info. Any energy advisor that is qualified to do this job will be able to answer those questions. In our case and many other cases that are now working as larger teams, that's going to be a team phone number. But if that phone number is there, whoever you are calling or giving a message to there should be able to look up the file. So hopefully the phone number that you're given doesn't send you to somebody who has no idea what this project is. If that's the case, that's the wrong phone number to have there. On the side over here, as far as the date goes, that's the date, I filled out this form. That should be pretty straightforward. The service organization and energy advisor ID. Now we are using the ERS pathway here, so you must be a certified energy advisor or registered energy advisor, depending on which terms people like to use, in order to fill out this form this way. So I'm going to have a energy advisor ID, and I'm going to have a service organization. For those that aren't familiar with the process, a service organization is the third-party quality control organization that will take my file, review it, and make sure it's all good, and then send it into NRCan. So there's that sort of third-party situation there. The energy advisor ID is my ID at NRCan. So that's what ties my insurance to the file, and you could send that number into NRCan and say, hey, is this guy still registered? And they should be able to tell you. NRCan's not all that fast at responding to those things, so that's not going to be a fast thing, but that would tie me to this file. And if maybe I was found to be doing fraud or something in your permit file, that would be the number to send out to the complaint line for if things are going wrong. You'll notice there is no section for a signature. That is because the energy advisor signature isn't really worth very much. It's really that energy advisor ID that is required. So signing this does not do anything. There's no sign section. So please don't ask energy advisors to sign this. The little section down here is the P file number. So many AHJs are requiring registration with NRCan to sort of ensure that it goes through that quality assurance process. So my home district of Saanich does that. And so that's going to show up here in this, it's automatically populated from the extraction side of things. And so I've just got some generic numbers in there, but that should show up with that number. And it is quite relatively easy to pre-register a project with a P-file number. Important note that just because it has a P-file number does not necessarily mean it's been through quality control. That just means I've registered it and I have intention of putting it through quality control, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually gone through that process. Moving down to section D, in terms of code compliance on this section. In the past, some districts have asked for a lot of detail in this section. And we've given a different instruction here. So in the instructions that we can highlight here, we've given very simple instructions. And the simple reason for that is because this is intended to communicate to the builder. We can make all sorts of assumptions like we talked about in the previous sections about drywall and siding and things like that. So really only material differences need to be captured here. Whether or not there's rain screen, really thick or well-insulated siding, for example. Otherwise, we're going to assume there's siding on it. We're going to assume there's drywall on it. We don't need to do that. As far as checking this goes, for the plan checker, what we would be looking at here in the RSI values. Now, there's no minimum RSI value required anymore. Theoretically, I could have a wall that has no insulation in it at all, as long as everything else is really well insulated. That would be theoretically code compliant. Kind of a dumb idea, but theoretically still step code compliant. Here, so if we had an RSI value that seemed way out of line for some reason. Now, this is a different calculation than what we would traditionally see on the plans. It's not the same way of just taking that sort of square of an envelope and adding up the layers. This is calculated by HOT 2000, which accounts for thermal bridging and corners and things like that. So it'll be a little bit different. So if you're plan checking this, really what we're doing here is saying, does this pass the sniff test? Is this realistic? Right? If I'm saying it's a 2x6 wall and I've got maybe an RSI of 10 in there, well, that doesn't sound realistic at all. That sounds like somebody made a mistake. I'm going to flag that and I'm going to probably reject that permit based on there being that mistake. But if it seems reasonable, if it's in the sort of the ballpark that we would expect for that type of wall, there's no minimum RSI value, so it doesn't need to be below that. One of the main reasons for this actually being here at all is really that if a builder were to be in a situation where they needed to change the wall or they needed to, do something different, maybe a client changed what they wanted to do, it's giving us the RSI value that we've assumed for the model. And what it's saying is like, okay, well, you can construct any wall, up to you how you make that wall. But it needs to be at least this RSI value or pretty close to it. Maybe if we've got some wiggle room in the model, we might be okay with a little bit less. So we're not really worried about the exact number. We're just sort of, is this a ballpark? Does this sound realistic? Does this look right? And we're going to have that same sort of check on everything. Now on the windows, same idea here. There is no necessarily minimum in the step code that we can use. There is, however, efficiency guidelines in BC for what you're allowed to sell and install. And that minimum in BC is a U value of 1.6. So we shouldn't see windows here assumed here of below 1.6 because that manufacturers shouldn't be selling that and builders shouldn't be installing that. But otherwise, pretty much anything goes there. For compliance on the heating systems, now obviously if you're on the zero carbon step code, we're going to see all electric systems for the most part here. However, it is still quite possible to meet the zero carbon step code even at EL4 with gas supplementary heating. That is quite possible. So even if you're at EL4, you may still see this section. In fact, this house that we filled this out for does meet EL4 and does still have a gas condensing furnace as a supplementary system. So, for the most part, we're probably going to see all electric systems in that case, but you will, particularly in the colder regions, not uncommonly see a supplementary system there. So even if you're at EL4, you may still see gas use, and that would still be compliant there. In some situations, we may have multiple heating systems, and there maybe just isn't enough room to fill it out kind of nicely and neatly here. So what we've asked energy advisors to do is do their best to communicate with you, the plan checker, what is going on with this house. So for example, if we had a suite here, we might write suite, and the suite has electric baseboards in there, and they are 100% efficient, like that. So that's what we're training energy advisors to do their best to communicate with you clearly what is going on with the different parts of this building. You know, if the house has an electric fireplace or something, I'm not going to list that. That's not part of the main heating system, so we don't need that kind of detail. But I'm going to try my best to communicate with you what's going on here. If you're unsure, if I've used acronyms that you don't know what it means, you know, that's the time to seek that clarification. Maybe reach out to that energy advisor and say, hey, what do you mean by this? Can we get some clarification on here? If it really seems wrong, by all means, that would warrant a rejection. Certainly, if you've got you know, something here showing up as a principal heating system as a gas furnace, and the report says it is passing EL4, that would certainly be pretty fishy and warrant a rejection. So really, all of this is about passing. Does it pass the SNP test, right? More necessarily than an exact sort of thing. And that takes care of this section as far as code compliance goes. Moving down, again, we would be leaving the 936.5 section blank because we are doing the ERS pathway, so we are leaving that blank. And we'll come back to that in another section of the video. Moving down to the compliance detail section here, we've got both the zero carbon and the energy compliance here. If you're not asking for the pre-construction or as-built detail reports, you will find other details here that could help you with a plan check. For example, the heated floor area, quite critical to most of the metrics, building volume, surface area, window to wall, you know, the location, we happen to be in terrace today, the heating degree days, and whether or not it is cooled. So, you know, if you're not getting that detail report, we do still have some detail there for you to do a little bit of a check and make sure, you know, that matches up with the plans you're receiving. I'll also note that we do have, in this case, we have the NLR is out there. It is failing. And so it's marked as red there. You know, that's a fail of that particular metric, but that's perfectly acceptable because we only need to meet one of these three. So it is still showing pass, and we are still saying pass overall. So that is perfectly acceptable to have some red there. And similarly down on the zero carbon step code side of things. So we have carbon in our heating system here, that supplementary gas system. We also have, in this particular house, has gas laundry and a fireplace. So we have other systems that are on gas. So this particular metric is a fail, but we only have to hit one of these. So two of these could be a fail and one pass, and we'd still make it. So we are hitting EL4 with this home, and it does have gas fireplace, appliances, and a supplementary heating system. And that is normal under this code. Completing a compliance verification on the mid-construction form will be similar now to all the other forms. They all look very similar now, and that was intentional to be able to give that easy workflow through. So we should be able to have the same sorts of details on this form that we saw on the pre-construction form. What we're looking at now, though, is an updated form from the previous version. So as the project has progressed, we're now capturing any changes, and we're starting to verify pieces of it. So the first page looks almost identical to the previous form. So same rules apply there. It should all be accurate information, should all be completely filled out. The main section that's going to start to be different is section D of this form. So we see the same text that we saw on the pre-construction form, but now it's going to capture those any changes that happen. And as we saw in the filling out this form version, if I make a change here, it's going to highlight it for me, and that is for those plan checkers at the office there to just here is a quick highlight there that something has changed. You know, green's going to say, well, this is better insulation now. Highlighting red is going to show it up as worse. So hopefully, sort of compliance at a glance helps everybody out to sort of know where things have changed. On the side here, as far as the site verified and unable to verify or not yet installed, this was a request. These particular things were requested by AHJs to put in there, but it is really important for inspectors and municipal policymakers to understand that an energy advisor is not an inspector. We do carry some limited liability, but as far as our liability for site inspection goes, it is zero. Our verification system and setup is all really designed to be done at the end of the project when all of this would be covered. So it is really still up to the AHJ to go out and inspect and see for themselves that what is in the walls matches this form. There is that professional obligation, I think, to go out for an energy advisor and take a look and see for ourselves that it is actually correct. But as we've discussed in previous sections of this video, that's not always practical. It doesn't always happen, and it is not a requirement. So really, the site verified, unable to verify here, this is more our indication to you that we did actually go and look at it. Ideally, it would be the same if you've got a whole bunch of site verified notes here and it's saying, yeah, I'm saying to you that I went and looked, but all of these things are different. I would certainly raise some red flags about that energy advisor, whether they're filling things out correctly. And certainly, if you go to site and somebody has said site verified and it is the wrong R value in the wall, that form you received should be rejected if you are seeing different things in the mid-construction form than what you saw on site. They should all match, and that would be a means for rejection and very much grounds for rejection if this form does not match what is actually being built on site. It should match, and it should match very closely. Similar sort of story all the way down there. Obviously, in many cases, we are not going to have systems installed. So heating systems, ventilation systems, those aren't necessarily going to be installed yet. So very reasonable for an energy advisor to put not yet installed as a selection. Totally reasonable. And also very reasonable to say unable to verify on things such as under slab insulation. We're going to rely on, say, pictures from the builder or assurances from the builder of some kind that they did actually put the slab insulation there. And again, this is where the inspection of the city comes in. That if it's important to the city that insulation be verified somehow, that would need to be an inspector going to site. We can't necessarily rely on an energy advisor to do that. It's not part of the scope of an energy advisor. Moving down to section D, you should be receiving a filled out version of this, but it may look differently as we've seen in previous parts of this video. This is possible to fill out without doing a blower door test. So if somebody didn't do a blower door test, you can fill it out and it would blank off this first part here. So critical items here are that we've done a few test points, that we're not just doing one test point. That wouldn't be a valid test. So we have a high and a low. We're not trying to reach 50 pascals, and that is an extrapolated number here. So we can say at 50 pascals in terms of our rating, even having only gone to 30. But that's why we need those we need a few test points along the line to create that slope line so we can create that extrapolation. So if you're seeing, say somebody did 15 and 15, they only did one test pressure, that would not be a valid blower door test. That would constitute a rejection. You could say, well, this isn't a valid blower door test. Go do it again and get us some proper numbers here. That would be valid response from a city. As far as who done it here, mid-construction is not part of the normal EnerGuide system, and so there isn't necessarily a requirement for the mid-construction tester to be a certified energy advisor as far as EnerGuide goes. So in some cases, when somebody is an energy advisor in training, and our team has done this, where you've got maybe a potential or a trainee energy advisor who's almost all the way through their training, their skills are they're getting there, and it's time for them to start spreading their wings a little bit and sort of having their own sort of experience on a bit of a longer leash. What we've done in the past in a mid-construction test for builders who we are pretty sure are pretty good. You know, they're doing all right. They've done a really good job on their things here. These tests are maybe becoming a bit of a formality. That uncertified person could go to site, run the blower door test, and get a result. They wouldn't necessarily, by EnerGuide requirements, need to be certified. In my opinion, that person should be at least almost certified and have a fair amount of training. Certainly, we wouldn't want to be sending some, greenhorn out there to just run a bunch of equipment and not give good advice to a builder. Typically, our team would, be at a subdivision and maybe the new guys in this building and the experienced persons in this building. And if anything goes wrong, you can shout across to the next building and say, hey, something's going wrong over here. But it's a good opportunity for trainee energy advisors to sort of get their feet wet in an actual test, maybe without somebody looking over their shoulder immediately. So that in that way, it may not be a certified person going there. We may see like a testing tech, for example. But that said, it is up to the authority having jurisdiction to decide whether or not this person is qualified. And so, I may be able to justify this person's qualifications in my mind, but, that is up to the authority having jurisdiction. And that's why we've given this box here of test completed by, who did it. It may not be the same person doing the model. Our team has 9 members on it. It, could be any one of the team that goes out and does that testing. And that is perfectly acceptable under EnerGuide rules to do that, and it is common in the industry, particularly as energy consultancy firms grow and come together as teams. So this is often likely not to be the same person that did the energy model. Now, if I did the energy model, I'm still taking responsibility overall for it. This just happens to be the person that did the blower door for me, but it's still my responsibility if something is wrong in this model. So I'm still carrying the ultimate sort of responsibility for the accuracy of this model. As far as what the next piece is down here, we're going to give a bit of an indication of what's going on with the test. Now, it's not uncommon for the house to be in a certain level of disarray at mid-construction, and that is acceptable. Sometimes, we can still sort of cobble together a test, but it's maybe a bit of a sketchy test. And so we might do more of like a qualitative test than an actual, air tightness test. And that would be commented out here, and would be acceptable in my opinion, where we might say, I might even write NA in the test result, because we weren't able to get a proper result. But what we did is we turned the fans on, we used the thermal camera or the smoke or the feathers, and we found a bunch of leaks. Whether or not we actually got a result or not was maybe secondary. That's the whole point of the mid-construction test, is not to verify that we actually passed, it's to verify that we're on track. And there are many cases where we would get a result that is higher than the code allowance, but I would still say, you know what, with these repairs, we're fine. We don't need to come back and test. And that brings us to this red light, green light here. So right now this is set to a green light where we've said, oh, we got a result of 2. That's well within the step 3 range. We're good to go. We're not too worried about it. If an inspector or plan checker does see the red light on there, I think that's worth taking a pause and taking a look at as to why. There should be details attached to this or written down in the next section here as to why that's failed or what the recommendation actually is. So if this section down here said, yes, okay, house failed, plan for correction is aero barrier, that to me, that would be acceptable. We're gonna proceed to drywall, and then we're gonna use aero barrier. That is a reasonable thing to do. Builders do it fairly regularly. So if this came into the plan office there and it said this, I would say that's acceptable to move along. We can allow that project to go on to drywall. There's no reason to hold it up. If it came back to me with that red stamp on it and there was no plan, definitely, if I'm the inspector, I'm going to be holding that project up. I want to know what that plan is to correct that. As long as the plan sounds reasonable in any way, I think certainly we wouldn't want to be holding up the project. Airtight drywall is a very valid thing to do, and we can work on that. So if you are seeing that red notice there, it's not a showstopper. That's not a stop work order necessarily. but certainly we should be having a plan. And if any of the lines in here say see attached report, there should be an accompanying report that is coming with this form to the city. So that would include, maybe photos or more details that maybe don't fit on this particular form, and that should be included as an appendix to this. Moving on down, this section is similar to the previous reports. We are seeing that compliance information and that same as all the other reports there. So we're getting that new updated snapshot in time from this particular project. In terms of code compliance for the as-built checklist, now we've got an actual house that is in place and we can verify. So everything should be verified on site. There is a requirement for an energy advisor following the ERS pathway to go to site and actually do a blower door test. There are restrictions on when that happens. It must happen at a certain time in the project or after a certain time in the project, and so that house must be at a certain sort of standard of completion before this can happen. Generally, that standard is mechanical systems installed, envelope complete. So whether the painting is complete, the landscaping is complete, we don't care. That doesn't matter. The finishes are irrelevant as far as the EnerGuide rating system goes. But mechanical systems, like for example, the heat pump should be there bolted to the floor. Whether or not it's turned on or not, irrelevant. If the last connection on the pipe is not made yet, also, I wouldn't worry too much about that. Quite often everybody's racing for occupancy and everything's a little last minute there. But as long as it's in there, bolted to the floor, it's acceptable as to be running that final occupancy testing and such. It is acceptable to have a couple of openings not installed. So it is acceptable to have a window missing and a door missing and just polyed off. That is acceptable under the EnerGuide rating standard. So if we have, say, the front door, for example, that is back ordered and not there, it would be acceptable in that case to still run that test, and that would be compliant. And on that same vein, say if we have a heat pump that is really back ordered, I would say for the EnerGuide standard, if that heat pump is not there, we shouldn't be including it in our energy model. That said, there's I think an argument for some leeway here because we have seen such dramatic supply chain issues over the last few years that if all the hookups for the heat pump are there, the pad is there, we've got the order form for the heat pump, we know it's coming. It's just going to be another 2 weeks, and this poor family just wants to move into their house. It's summertime. We don't need the heat pump anyways. Let's just let them move in. And what we'll do in those cases is we will do the blower door testing. We will take all of our photos, and we will come back and take a photo of that heat pump when it arrives, and then send that package off to EnerGuide for its certification and things like that. So. A little bit of leeway, I think there's some judgment on the part of the inspection officials to sort of have that flexibility. I think in this sort of modern context of supply chain issues makes a lot of sense, even though it's not maybe to the letter of everything. I think would be prudent in this case. Certainly end up with a lot less fights in the builders with the builders because those things are beyond their controls, and even if they're doing the best they can. So this form, very, very similar to the other ones, again, with the compliance information. The main difference here is now we're basing it on a set of as-built plans. If there aren't as-built plans, I'm going to give you some indication of, where I got that information from. Quite often, builders aren't doing as-built plans in Part 9, but there should be, some sort of indication of, what that's based on. It might just be a site visit as well. So, I could write down a site visit. That's what I did. That's how I verified that my model is correct. And that would be acceptable. Same contact information there. For those districts that are requiring N-file registration, once again, the N-file shows up here. And if we have a whole bunch of them, they'll just be listed there for, say, for a townhouse example. But the N-file number just means that I have paid for that registration and I intend to send it through. Doesn't necessarily mean that it has made it through the system yet. But, you know, if I've already paid for the registration, chances are I'm going to send it through. So, you know, I might as well. Moving on down to section D. If you're not using the mid-construction form, this can still be used. It still works exactly the same way. So we don't have to use the mid-construction form. This all relates back to the pre-construction. So these highlights, whatever they may be, will relate back to the pre-construction form if necessary. So here we're verifying what actually went on. Hopefully you've got your inspection reports and things that would all match this. If this doesn't match your inspection reports, you know, for installation R values, for example, that would constitute a rejection of this form. And moving on down to the compliance here, once again, same as all the other forms here, the information is there. There's a little bit of plan checking information available to the permit office there as well. It should show pass there. It should show, you know, pass down here at the bottom as well, similar to all the other forms. We'd like to now talk about some special cases that are unique to some areas, may not apply to everywhere, but it's important for folks to know. Number one is climate data. As anybody working with HOT 2000 knows, not all of the climate data is particularly relevant within HOT 2000. Here in my hometown of Victoria, we have a lot of climate zones. They're very small, and our data is really good, but that is not the case across the province. And a really good example of that is Rossland, where their heating degree days is 4,850, and HOT 2000 would have us use the Osoyoos climate data, which is you know, just a little over 3,000. Obviously substantially different. The ski hill at Rossland, obviously nowhere near the town of Osoyoos, and it is vastly different. So the workaround here is for an AHJ to choose a different climate data set to use. In the case of Rossland, they have chosen Cranbrook, and I really do have to thank the folks at Rossland there. Is what they did is they consulted with their local energy advisors and came up with a good solution. They picked one that is relatively close in heating degree days, also roughly the same latitude, and it allows us to model much more accurately the real situation on the ground without too much trouble. And in this, all we're doing is taking the climate and switching it in HOT 2000. That one drop down, that's it. There are no other changes to the energy model. And so in our work process, when we're working in the Rossland area, what our team will do is build the entire model with the Cranbrook data set in there. And then at the very last minute, when we're ready to send it to NRCan, we will switch that one drop down and send it into NRCan. And that way, we're not overly compromising our quality control process, and we can still get through the whole process without having to create multiple versions of the model. And everything sort of, you know, works out reasonably well. We can still have accuracy for the code. We can still fit into the ERS box and be compliant there. So we may see this in a few different areas. In particular, ones that we've noted with our team are Sun Peaks is using Rocky Mountain House. That's Rocky Mountain House, Alberta. Very close match in heating degree days, also close match in the latitude. If I was modeling Mount Washington, I would be using Whistler. You know, Big White and Silver Star might have similar sorts of situations, although I haven't yet heard what they're choosing. If somebody knows what they're choosing and such, we can maybe put it here in the comments or something like that and available somewhere on this website. So it is up to the AHJ to make sure that folks understand this and know what the climate data set is supposed to be. So again, here, you know, Rossland has it on their website, on their permit submission guidelines. There, it says you will use this as the thing, and hopefully every other district that is looking at doing something like this will do that as well. So it's very clear for energy advisors working in the area to make that call. The other piece that some AHJs are doing is asking energy advisors to alter the heating degree days after the model. And now I'm going to express a fair bit of caution for doing this. This is something Rossland has done as well, and it's primarily because they have such a vast difference between the lower town and the upper town. But I do want to express a high degree of caution on this. And so the Rossland example, they have 3 different heating degree days. They, Lower Town is 4,200, Midtown 46, and Upper Town is the 48 there as you go up the mountain. Now, from an accuracy perspective, as far as what is actually going on in those areas, those heating degrees are likely correct. Like probably, there's a lot more snow at the top of the mountain than there is at the bottom. We know that, we understand that. However, this is changing the compliance, not the actual model. And so we have seen in some situations in some districts where altering the heating degree days after the model has a fairly negative consequence, either by allowing a home to have a free pass or by unfairly penalizing a home where it's making the heating, the code compliance unduly strict. And even small changes in this can have that effect. So certainly any NHJ looking at doing this should look with real caution on this. And as to whether or not it is a risk they would like to take. Quite often in many districts, they're relying on the building code, what it says in there for the heating degree day. That's not necessary. There is the option for an HJ to choose a different heating degree day. There's a link within the building code to contact people to say what it actually is. When that contact happens, typically the folks at at NRCan there will, or Weather Canada or whatever it's called now, will send back a report that looks very similar to the climate data in HOT 2000. HOT 2000 does have relatively update data for the locations, obviously not necessarily for the mountains, but for the locations where the weather station is, and certainly helps our quality control process if all of those can just match and we can just use the heating degree within HOT 2000. I would draw 2 different separate points as well. There is a difference between accuracy and code compliance, right? Accuracy, we want to be to the letter and the number, and that's great. But in code compliance, what we need to be is fair and evenly enforceable. And if we're messing around with heating degree days and such, we could end up in a situation, and we have seen this in some HJs where one side of the street has one code compliance, the other side has a different one. Exactly the same house on either side of the street, but vastly different code compliance. And so those are the sorts of risks that we see, and certainly any HJ should be very cautious of should they be looking at this approach. In the event that an energy advisor is asked to change the heating degree day, you will be changing it after the data is extracted from HOT 2000. You will have to overwrite the auto-populated number and place it in the heating degree day section on the calculator sheet. Very easy to do. Just remember to do it after the extraction because the extraction will overwrite that number. Now onto some unique situations with a mix of stacked and non-stacked units. The general rule of thumb here is that if it can be done as a MERB whole building, do a MERB whole building. We don't use MERB single unit within step code. And so in this case where we've got stacked on one side, stacked on the other, single in the middle, we're going to have 3 different models. So 2 stacked duplexes and 1 townhouse middle unit in this case. So here's an example of one in real life in Tsawwassen, where we've got a stack on each side and a single piece in the middle there and a stack on that side. So what we've got here is 3 different models. That's going to show up in the calculator this way, where we've got that townhouse middle unit as its own, and then the 2 side units each have their own model as a stacked duplex MERB. So we won't be going and using any MERB single units on these code compliance form. It's always MERB whole building whenever that is possible. For a MERB like this is a 6-plex here with stacked apartments on each side. In this case, we're going to be doing it as one single whole building and just following that procedure there and using only 1 line in the calculator. So this can be done as 1 model. It is a Part 9 MERB, so 1 model, 1 line in the calculator. Now, some folks out there are using 936.5, and I'm not going to get into real detail on 936.5. There is a document provided by NRCan. That's this document, the guideline for using HOT 2000 version 11 to demonstrate compliance with section 936.5 2015 building code, on and on and on. This document is available and is a guide to modeling 936.5. So we won't be going into any sort of detail on that. If you're doing 936.5, we expect that you would take training on that, but we won't go into terribly detailed on that. As far as filling out the checklist for the 936.5 requirements, we're going to be filling out the checklist as we have exactly the same for the 936 way of doing it. So that's the ERS pathway. So everything is still going to be filled out that way. We're just going to be switching the code pathway here to the 936.5 BC Energy Step Code option. And that will then mean we need to fill out section E. So normally section E would be left blank if you're just following the ERS pathway. But if we're following 936.5, we do need to fill that out. This is not an auto-populated field here. This does need to be filled out manually, with the exception of the error, the tested target here. So if you don't have a tested target, then this wouldn't auto-populate. This populates from the actual calculator page. But we can select our metrics in the same way we can in other sections. For a proposed house, we can select what we're proposing to hit, and as well down here we can say whether it performed in compliance with subsection division B there. And so the same way we have on previous forms, we're going to be filling this out: the reference house, HVAC, domestic hot water, which will then sum automatically for us, and the proposed house, reference house and hot water there as well. So two separate things that we need to be filling out for 936.5. In addition, we will still be filling out the entire calculator here as well. All of these fields are required in order to populate the step code tables here. So if you're doing 936.5, you do need to fill out this entire table as well as that other form here as well. Should you have things that need to be added up or averaged, we do have these extra rows here that allow you to fill out your air tightness, for example, so that they could be averaged between suites, say in a townhouse example or something like that. You might need to average those numbers throughout a suite, and this then does it for you, and then we'll populate it into the correct spots. And those hidden fields are available for both the proposed and the as-built. So we can do that by showing more rows and hiding those rows in that way. So if you're doing 936.5, the form works very much in the same way. We're just going to be filling out those extra pieces. I would note that if you are running a HOT 2000 in 936.5 mode, which is basically general mode, you will not be able to auto-populate the data. You can do a get data and it will pull in some of it, but it will not pull all of it. So you will need to go through and manually fill that out, which means that then your pre-construction detail and as-built detail report will not work. It will generate an error. In those cases, you will have to use the HOT 2000 full house report as part of your permit for any place that is asking for that. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. Hopefully everybody made it all the way to the end. Should you need additional resources, there is always the Energy Step Code website. This webinar, as well as the compliance tools and any supplementary information, will be available there. That's energystepcode.ca/compliance tools. Also other information on education and other things on that website. This recorded version, of course, if you're watching it, you're probably watching it there, but it can also be found in several different locations. Any further feedback or questions can be directed to the Building Safety Standards branch at building.safety@govbc.ca. Thanks for coming.